Maybe once in the presentation. Some of her favorite things to do are watch good films, buy corn on the cob at Marina Beach in Chennai, and cook or confidently try to. She talks too much about Indian mythology, Richard Linklater, early religious Tamil writing, and psychoanalysis, often without warning. So, Vidya, take it away.
We're starting now. Hi everybody, thank you Aditya for introducing me. Thank you Sakshi and Sia. I'm Srividya Suresh. I'm a second year master's student and the title of my thesis is Fathers and Foes, a study of Kuru fathers and sons. Before I begin, I wanted to take a quick second to thank my thesis advisor, Professor Amrita Narayanan, who has guided me both through her words and sometimes through her alarming and pregnant silences. Time is running out. This thesis is very special to me because I think it has been a part of me for much longer than I have realized. I like to think it started when I was 10 and when my dad took me to a neighborhood bookstore in December, the month of devotion or Margari in Madras. Amidst the seasonal display of religious texts, I picked up a comic version of the Ramayana. A week later, I asked him for the Mahabharata, but my father, usually open-minded, refused. When I put up a slight protest, he doubled down on this classic superstition that just reading or even owning a copy of the Mahabharata was an invitation for household conflict. As 10 years have gone by and I find myself in Sonipat, proclaimed to be one of the villages that Yudhishthira asked in war, I realize perhaps that this project in many ways is a return to not only the epic that has remained unread for me, but also to my father's fantasy of this unread epic and my endeavors to interpret this fantasy. In the book Many Mahabharatas, Nell Shapiro and Sohini Pillai write that the clearest indicator of the epic's allure is the fact that for the last 2000 years, the most common response to it has been to recreate it. The question of what the epic becomes when it is retold across different forms is particularly important for South Asian literature because this tradition has always been fundamentally intertextual, oral, and fluid, with epics like the Mahabharata existing in multiple forms, often competing across languages and regions. In my thesis too, I am working with 3 Mahabharata plays of the Sanskrit playwright Basa, Pancharatram, Dutavakyam, and Urubhangam, where I will be looking closely at the character of Duryodhana and the relationships that he shares with the father figures, or broadly the paternal function. By doing this, I want to depart from the predominant way in which the Indian psychoanalytic tradition has viewed the father-son dyad. In Derrida's geopsychoanalysis, he helps us understand how psychoanalysis moved from its place of origin, Europe, to places like the Indian subcontinent. He describes how European psychoanalysis is so protective of its origins that even when it listens to its outsiders, it's very controlled. These outsiders, often foreign bodies, he suggests that the eagerness to listen to them is not about being open, but rather a way to manage any differences or disruptions that the outsider might bring. In this way, the outsider is allowed to carefully participate, but not really make a genuine intervention. This dynamic is particularly evident in Freud's interaction with the first Indian psychoanalyst, Girinder Shekhar Bose, where Freud dismisses of Bose's attempts to rework any psychoanalytic theory based on his own clinical observations in India. I bring this up because the stakes of my thesis lie precisely here, in offering a way to rethink how psychoanalysis might be approached in the Indian tradition, and in asserting that such additions are not symptoms that need to be contained and neutralized, but essential contributions that contribute to this discipline's ongoing life. Thank you. The Indian psychoanalytic tradition has largely maintained a static view of the father-son relationship, particularly in the context of mythological narratives. A.K. Ramanujan and Spratt have been instrumental in adapting the Oedipal complex to the Indian context, and their analysis suggests a shift in the positive psychoanalytic framework posited by Freud. They say in the Indian mythology, it is not the son who commits parricide or the killing of the father, but rather the father who exhibits aggression towards the son, often leading to filicide. This dynamic maintains the father as the primary aggressive figure, with the son consistently succumbing to the father's control and authority. So my thesis then emerges out of 2 points of tension. One, of referring to the father-son relationship as static, as I just mentioned, and 2, of referring to this Oedipus as Indian, but still locating it within the nuclear familial unit. For all of these plays, however, you cannot speak of the Oedipus without bringing up the mother. In the 3 plays I'm working with, there is no direct presence of any of the maternal figures, but when we see Duryodhana though, his miraculous birth is accounted for by the fact that he was carved out of a lump of flesh that his mother gave birth to, put into a jar with ghee and buried in the earth for 2 years. So Gandhari is Duryodhana's mother, but so is the land, the womb that nurtured him. Alongside collapsing this divide, I'm also saying that it is this motherland, Indraprastha herself, that becomes one of the motivating factors for Duryodhana to dismiss the Pandavas' claim over the land, as he says that these are people who are born of the gods and not of the earth herself. In the next part of my presentation, I'm going to go over the 3 plays I'm working with, covering the idea of an incomplete transition in Pancharatram, the idea of surrogate father figures in Dutavakyam, and ultimately in Urubangam, the assertion of autonomy in Duryodhana's death. In the first play, Pancharatram, Bhasa gives us a rare pause in Duryodhana's otherwise aggressive and defiant character. After performing a sacrificial ceremony, the Vaishnava Yagna, Duryodhana becomes for a moment open to peaceful negotiation. He is urged by elders like Drona to divide the kingdom at the end of this sacrifice, to which he agrees, but on the condition that the Pandavas are found within the next 5 days. He seems willing to walk the path of peace very briefly here. Duryodhana's move towards paternal order through Drona can be read under the light of Sudhir Kakur's idea of the Oedipal alliance, which is the desire of the Oedipal son to be guided into the realm of the paternal. However, Kakur seems to have 2 limitations in his reasoning. The first is that Kakur's model centers on a psychoanalytic subject struggling with his inner psyche in a vacuum, whereas Duryodhana is a Kshatriya prince shaped by ritual and social structures of warrior dharma. The second limitation is that this alliance is in and itself complete for Kakur, whereas Bhasa shows us that it is inherently fluid and carries the potential to lose meaning of its destinations. My thesis intervenes at this point because I say that the Vaishnava Yagna is not just a fire ritual. It also means self-offering and, most importantly, an initiation. The first act opens with a long description of Duryodhana's grand sacrifice. However, even before the final ritual bath can be accomplished, that is, even before the sacrifice and the initiation are complete, the sacrificial fire surges out of control and destroys the hall of sacrifice and the surrounding forest. This alludes to the fact that this alliance was almost over, meaning Duryodhana's move to adhering to the wish of the paternal was almost over. But what characterizes it is its incompleteness. His fleeting movement into nobility is his symbolic adherence to the wish of the paternal, but neither does this movement in the form of ritual reach completion, nor is he repositioned back to where he began from. Instead, we find him stuck midway and especially alone. I used the word fleeting just now, since the very next play that I'm looking at is Dutavakyam. Set in the Udyoga Parva, Krishna comes in person in this play to negotiate the division of the land one last time before the Kurukshetra war begins. This one-act play is very interesting because I argue that Krishna takes up 2 roles simultaneously for Duryodhana. First, in line with Robert Goldman's concept of attack and transference, he displaces his frustration with Dhritarashtra onto Krishna, resisting who he perceives as an external moral authority. By attacking Krishna, he symbolically attacks his own father, further solidifying Krishna's role as a paternal figure. As Krishna takes up his divine form and reveals himself to be an incarnation of Vishnu, Duryodhana says, "Kingdoms are won by princes with stout hearts who defeat their enemies," thus denoting that the kingdom is his own. Borrowing the idea of surrogate fathers from Goldman, who says that uncles and gurus play as much the role of the father as the real father does, I intend to add to Goldman as well as the Oedipus framework through the inclusion of a divine entity in the nature of the father. Simultaneously, the second role that Krishna plays is the father of the enemy, Pandu. While elder Kuru leaders like Bhishma, Drona and Vidura speak on behalf of the Duryodhana, it is Krishna and Kunti who speak for the Pandavas, thus becoming the enforcers of the Pandava legitimacy. After speaking of the fact that the Pandavas are actually not even Pandu's sons but rather sons of gods, Duryodhana says, "Not a blade of this grass will I give of this kingdom held and protected by my forefathers." This reveals a deep contradiction because he is claiming the land as both mine and as ours. The fight over Indraprastha becomes then symbolically a struggle over the motherland, who she belongs to and who belongs to her. So as Krishna finally assumes his universal form, the Vishvarupa, and Sudarshana starts to speak, Duryodhana falls silent. It is as if in this moment he is confronted by a truth that he cannot reject, that the inheritance, the land, the figure of Indraprastha herself must belong to those deemed most dharmic. Dharmic here referring to the most adherent to the theophany of Krishna. And in recognizing the Pandavas as sons of God, he is perhaps unwillingly acknowledging the unshakable truth of his Kshatriya birth. Dutavakyam and the next play, Urubangam, are very closely linked. I'm saying this because Alf Hilterbattle, in his book Ritual of Battle, speaks of the Vaishnava theological perspective when saying that Duryodhana's ultimate sin is not of usurping the kingdom or his opposition to the Pandavas, but that these actions are subsumptive of a larger sin that he commits, the opposition to Krishna in his universal form, as we just saw in Dutavakyam. Bhasa brings the implicit tension in all of these plays to an end in Urubangam, the tension between Krishna's dharma of righteous duty and Duryodhana's desire for his own Kshatriya duty and rights. Thank you. By being blind to Krishna's divinity and asserting his autonomy, Duryodhana attains the fruit of simply just getting to die in the way he wishes to. In the play, Bhima strikes Duryodhana unethically on the thigh, thus rendering him immobile and close to death. A moral shift in his character occurs exactly at this moment. It is evident that this Duryodhana, Bhasa's Duryodhana, does not see himself as a player in the great divine drama of destruction that has been directed by Krishna. He does not subscribe to the Vaishnava recuperation of Dvesa Dharma or the notion that he is contributing to some ultimately preordained plan. Instead, Duryodhana displays indifference to the war, or perhaps even transcends the historical oppositions that created and sustained the war. This is displayed in the manner in which he tells his family that he wants to be remembered as the warrior who died in battle and as the man whose pride is undefeated by war because he got to act the way he wanted to and died the way he wanted to. Coming to the last section of my presentation, these are the first few lines of Urubangam. May Lord Krishna be a boat over the flood torrent of your foes, the same boat by which Arjuna crossed the river of his enemies, whose very current was Duryodhana. Duryodhana becomes the river itself, both the current that threatens and the movement that carries. To be the very substance that your enemy must cross in order to reach victory is in a way to be indispensable to that victory. My thesis does not seek to redeem him. It attempts instead to hold space for the contradictions that shape him. The absence of a mother, the suffocating presence of a paternal order, the longing for land as a surrogate womb, and a resistance to cosmic destiny that paradoxically fulfills it. In tracing his journey across these plays, I have come to see him not as a villain thwarted by dharma, but as a human deeply flawed, but also deeply moved by longing, undone by love, pride, and the desire to belong. So if Krishna is the boat that carries the Pandavas across the river, then Duryodhana is not the failure to be dharmic, but the very test of dharma itself. Thank you.